Today we're revealing the most devastating, innovative, and flat-out unstoppable long-range rifles that dominated the American frontier. And no, it's not just the Winchesters and Sharps you've heard about 1,000 times. We're uncovering weapons so powerful, so feared, they reshaped how hunts, battles, and standoffs were fought across the West. Get ready, because some of these rifles will rewrite everything you thought you knew about range, accuracy, and survival on the frontier. Number 15. The Hawken Plains Rifle, the Mountain Man's Reach. Long before lever actions and metallic cartridges ruled the West, the Hawken rifle became the trusted companion of mountain men and frontiersmen who lived or died by their ability to hit at distance. Built by Jacob and Samuel Hawken in St. Louis, these rifles were crafted for trappers, scouts, and explorers heading deep into the wilderness. Most were chambered in hefty .54 or .58 caliber, firing large round balls with enough force to drop elk, deer, or even buffalo. The barrels were thick and rifled, giving them accuracy far beyond the smoothbore muskets most settlers carried. For a man standing alone on the plains, a Hawken meant confidence. The knowledge that one well-placed shot could feed a camp, defend a trail, or stop an enemy long before they got close. These rifles weren't built for speed. Loading a Hawken was a deliberate ritual: powder, patch, ball, ram, cap. It could take a minute to ready one shot, but when it fired, that shot counted. Skilled trappers swore by the rifle's precision, claiming they could split playing cards or pick off targets at ranges others thought impossible. The percussion cap ignition also made it more reliable in bad weather than older flintlocks, an essential upgrade for men living in the Rockies or pushing west through snow and storms. But the Hawken came with drawbacks. It was heavy, awkward to carry for long distances, and far too slow for a running gunfight. Once repeaters like the Spencer and Winchester appeared, the Hawken's days as a battlefield rifle were over. Still, its place in frontier legend remained secure. The rifle's reputation was cemented by famous names like Kit Carson and Jim Bridger, who carried Hawkens on expeditions that became the stuff of American myth. For decades, it symbolized the rugged independence of men who stood alone against the wilderness, a weapon that demanded patience, accuracy, and grit. But if the Hawken gave lone trappers the edge in the wilderness, the next rifle would arm entire armies, and its brutal accuracy left a trail of shattered bodies across the frontier. Number 14. The Springfield Rifle Musket, model 1861/1863, the Civil War's long-range sledgehammer. When it came to putting long-range firepower into the hands of ordinary soldiers, no rifle did more than the Springfield Rifle Musket. Chambered in .58 caliber and firing the infamous Minié ball, this weapon gave Civil War troops the ability to kill with frightening precision at 300 to 500 yards. A single shot could tear through bone, muscle, and organ with such devastation that battlefield surgeons often had no choice but to amputate. After the war ended, tens of thousands of surplus Springfields made their way west, carried by veterans, settlers, and outlaws alike. For many, it was the first rifle that could be trusted to stop a charging horse, a buffalo, or an enemy long before they reached striking distance. To those who had only known muskets and smoothbores, the Springfield felt like the future, a weapon that gave distance a new, deadly meaning. But the Springfield wasn't without flaws. It was heavy and awkward to carry, and as a muzzle loader, it was painfully slow in a close fight. Pouring powder, seating a bullet, ramming, and capping took long, precious seconds. Seconds that could mean the difference between life and death against a repeating rifle. Thick clouds of black powder smoke revealed a shooter's position instantly, and in hand-to-hand combat, the long barrel could be more liability than asset. Still, on the open plains, behind cover, or in the hands of a practiced marksman, the Springfield's accuracy and power were unmatched. It became the workhorse of the frontier battlefield, and for years after the Civil War, it remained a terrifying equalizer. A reminder that even one slow-loading rifle could dominate if the man behind it knew how to use distance as his weapon. But as settlers carried Springfields west, a new breed of rifle appeared. One so precise it turned long-range shooting into an art form and made legends out of ordinary men. Number 13. The Whitworth Rifle, the sharpshooter's nightmare. The frontier was already dangerous, but the Whitworth Rifle brought a new kind of terror. Precision that felt almost unnatural for its time. Designed in Britain by Sir Joseph Whitworth in the 1850s, this rifle used a hexagonal bored barrel that gripped the bullet tighter than standard rifling. The result was a level of accuracy so far ahead of its era that it earned the Whitworth a reputation as the world's first true sniper's rifle. Confederate sharpshooters made it infamous during the Civil War. With imported scopes mounted on their Whitworths, they picked off Union officers from half a mile away, sometimes even farther. One general was killed at 800 yards, a shot so shocking that Union soldiers swore the Confederates must have been using some kind of witchcraft. The psychological impact was devastating. Men described the eerie whistle of a Whitworth round, and the sickening realization that they were being hunted from beyond the reach of their own rifles. A handful of these rifles made their way onto the frontier after the war. Wealthy hunters and professional marksmen prized them, and on the open plains they were unmatched. A man with a Whitworth could drop a buffalo, a wolf, or an enemy rider from distances where most guns were little more than noisemakers. Owning one wasn't just practical, it was a symbol of wealth, skill, and status. But brilliance has its price. The Whitworth fouled quickly, required meticulous cleaning, and its specialized ammunition was expensive and hard to find. In the dust and grit of the West, it was a finicky weapon compared to rugged American designs like the Sharps. Yet in the hands of a careful marksman, its superiority was undeniable. Stories spread of impossible shots, hitting man-sized targets at 1,000 yards, or cutting down buffalo that other rifles couldn't reach. The Whitworth didn't reshape the West in numbers, but it reshaped the idea of what a rifle could do. It proved that precision could be just as terrifying as firepower, and it set the stage for the frontier marksman to become a legend in his own right. But while the Whitworth wowed with European engineering, the next rifle was born in America, and it would combine brutal power with precision, rewriting both the battlefield and the buffalo range. Number 12. The Sharps rifle, the marksman's masterpiece. If one rifle embodied the art of long-range shooting on the frontier, it was the Sharps. Built in heavy calibers like the .45-70 and the monstrous .50-90, the Sharps delivered accuracy and power that turned ordinary men into feared sharpshooters. Its falling block action, paired with massive octagonal barrels often stretching over 30 inches, gave it stability and consistency that other rifles simply couldn't match. In skilled hands, it could put a half-inch slug on target at 800 yards, and there are accounts of hunters pushing it to 1,000 or more. On the buffalo ranges of the 1870s, the Sharps became king. Professional hunters relied on it to drop bison cleanly from extreme distances, reshaping the Great Plains almost overnight. A man lying prone with a Sharps could drop animal after animal, while the rest of the herd never even realized they were under fire. This efficiency made fortunes in hides and forever altered Native American life, who suddenly found their primary resource vanishing at industrial speed. Its reputation spread through both fact and legend. Marksmen bragged of splitting playing cards or hitting targets as far as the eye could see. Some hunters favored the Big 50, chambered in .50-90, which launched a 600 grain lead bullet with nearly 1,800 foot-pounds of energy. Enough to bring down a 2,000-pound bull buffalo in one devastating hit. To own a Sharps wasn't just practical, it was prestigious. Engraved models with custom sights became prized possessions, proof that their owners weren't just hunters, but elite marksmen. But all that power came with costs. The rifle was heavy, sometimes pushing 12 pounds, and its recoil was bone-rattling. It was a single-shot weapon, so against repeaters like the Winchester, a Sharps user often had one chance to make a shot count before being overrun. Its long barrel also made it awkward in close combat or on horseback. Still, no other rifle so perfectly combined precision and power. It gave the frontier its most famous marksmen, fueled the hide trade, and cemented its place in both history and folklore as the marksman's masterpiece. But while the Sharps gave lone hunters and shooters terrifying reach, the next rifle put long-range power into the hands of entire regiments. And its weaknesses would help spark one of the most infamous defeats in frontier history. Number 11. The Springfield Trapdoor Rifle, the soldier's workhorse with a fatal flaw. When the U.S. Army decided to modernize after the Civil War, they didn't scrap their muskets, they upgraded them. The result was the Springfield Trapdoor, a single-shot breech loader that swung open on a simple hinge, or trapdoor, to accept a powerful metallic cartridge. Chambered in .45-70 government, a round firing a 405-grain bullet at nearly 1,300 feet per second. The trapdoor gave soldiers a massive leap forward in firepower compared to muzzleloaders. For cavalry and infantry posted on the frontier, it was a revelation. A trooper could snap open the breech, drop in a cartridge, close it, and fire again within seconds. Far faster than pouring powder and ramming a ball. Its long effective range and heavy punch made it deadly against both man and beast. On the buffalo ranges, it could reliably drop a bison at several hundred yards, while in combat, its accuracy and stopping power gave U.S. forces an edge. But the rifle's reputation was tarnished by tragedy. At the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, some soldiers reported cartridges expanding in the heat and jamming inside the chamber. In the chaos of Custer's last stand when seconds meant survival, a jammed trapdoor could be fatal. Historians still debate how widespread those malfunctions really were, but the weapon's association with that infamous defeat never went away. Despite its flaws, the trapdoor soldiered on as the Army's standard rifle for nearly 2 decades. Settlers and hunters adopted surplus models, appreciating the raw punch of the 45-70 cartridge. It bruised shoulders, kicked like a mule, and left soldiers vulnerable against faster-firing repeaters. But when it worked, it hit with authority that few could ignore. For the men who carried it, the trapdoor was both comfort and curse. A rifle that felt modern compared to muskets, yet outdated as soon as repeaters took the spotlight. It was the transitional weapon of the frontier, powerful, dependable enough, but haunted by its battlefield reputation. And if the trapdoor was the Army's rugged workhorse, the next rifle was the dream of every marksman, a precision weapon that could turn a good shot into a living legend. Number 10. The Sharps, Big 50, the Buffalo Breaker. If the standard Sharps rifle was the marksman's masterpiece, the Big 50 was its monstrous older brother, a rifle built to dominate the buffalo ranges with sheer overwhelming power. Chambered in 50-90 Sharps, this beast fired a 600-grain lead slug propelled by up to 100 grains of black powder. At nearly 1,500 to 1,800 foot-pounds of energy, a single shot could drop a 2,000-pound bison in its tracks. Even at distances other rifles could barely scratch. For professional hide hunters of the 1870s, this rifle wasn't optional. It was essential. With a heavy barrel often 30 to 34 inches long, the Big 50 was stable, accurate, and devastating. Hunters would lie prone on the open plains, calmly cycling single rounds, and wipe out entire herds from hundreds of yards away. They could take down animal after animal while the rest of the herd barely realized they were under fire. This industrial slaughter, empowered largely by Sharps rifles, changed the economy of the frontier forever and nearly wiped the buffalo from the Great Plains. The rifle's legend grew quickly. Tales spread of hunters splitting playing cards or dropping targets as far as the eye could see. Owning one became a badge of status among marksmen. Engraved versions with custom long-range sights turned up in the hands of wealthy frontiersmen, who prized them as much for prestige as for practical use. But make no mistake, the Big 50 had its drawbacks. Weighing 12 pounds or more, it was punishing to carry and brutal to shoot. Its recoil could bruise shoulders after just a few shots, and carrying enough massive cartridges for a long hunt was a constant burden. Against repeaters, it was slow and vulnerable. Still, for the men who mastered it, the Sharps Big 50 was unmatched. It was the ultimate statement of frontier firepower. One shot, one kill, at a distance that seemed impossible in its day. But while the Big 50 ruled the open plains, the next rifle took long-range shooting in a very different direction, blending precision with rugged simplicity and becoming one of the toughest war horses the frontier ever saw. Number 9, the Remington Rolling Block Rifle, the indestructible warhorse. At a time when gunmakers were racing to design faster repeaters and more complicated mechanisms, Remington took a different path: simplicity and strength. The result was the Remington Rolling Block, a single-shot rifle so tough and dependable it became one of the most widely used firearms of the 19th century. Instead of levers or traps, its breech was a massive pivoting block of steel that literally rolled back to open, then locked forward like a vault door. It was almost impossible to break, even under the brutal conditions of the frontier. The rolling block was chambered in powerful cartridges like the 50-70 and the 45-70, firing 400 to 500 grain bullets at velocities around 1,200 to 1,300 feet per second. At long range, it packed bone-crushing energy that could bring down buffalo, horses, or men with a single well-placed shot. Its simple design made it extraordinarily reliable. Dust, grit, and rough handling that might jam a Spencer or Winchester barely fazed the Remington. If you could load it, it would fire. This rugged dependability made it a global phenomenon. Armies in more than 40 countries adopted rolling blocks, sending millions across Europe, South America, and Africa. On the American frontier, it was a favorite among buffalo hunters, scouts, and lawmen who valued a rifle they could count on when their lives depended on it. Many called it the farmer's Sharps. Not as fancy, but just as deadly in the right hands. But like all single shots, it had its limits. Against repeaters, the rolling block user had one chance before being forced to reload under fire. Its heavy recoil demanded strength and practice, and its long barrel wasn't ideal in tight quarters. Yet for those who prized reliability over speed, it was the rifle of choice. The rolling block wasn't glamorous, and it never earned the same legends as the Winchester or the Sharps. But it endured because it worked. Simple, strong, and unstoppable. Number 8. The Ballard Rifle, the marksman's secret weapon. Not every long-range legend of the West became a household name, but among serious hunters and target shooters, the Ballard Rifle had a reputation that could rival any Sharps or Springfield. First introduced in 1861 and refined over the following decades, the Ballard was a single-shot falling block rifle built in a wide variety of calibers, everything from .38 rimfire to the massive .50-90. That flexibility made it one of the most versatile long-range rifles of the frontier era. Hunters prized Ballards in heavy calibers like .44, .77, and .50-70, which gave them the power to drop buffalo, elk, or bear at several hundred yards. Competitive marksmen loved them for their accuracy. At shooting matches in the late 19th century, Ballards consistently turned heads, with shooters punching tight groups on targets out to 1,000 yards. On the plains, that same accuracy could mean the difference between a clean kill and a lost animal, or between winning a firefight and being outgunned. Specs-wise, Ballards were known for their crisp trigger pulls, strong but smooth actions, and heavy rifled barrels that delivered exceptional consistency. A .44-77 Ballard, for example, could launch a 400-grain bullet with enough muzzle energy to flatten large game at long distances. In the hands of a skilled rifleman, it had a reputation for hitting where others missed. But Ballards weren't mass-produced in the same numbers as Springfields or Winchesters, and that limited their spread. They were relatively expensive, often seen as a rifle for serious marksmen rather than everyday settlers. Still, those who carried one swore by its accuracy and power. In a world where reliability and precision often meant life or death, the Ballard earned quiet respect as the rifleman's rifle. It may not have the fame of the Winchester or the Sharps, but on the frontier ranges and in competitive shooting circles, the Ballard proved that accuracy could be every bit as deadly as raw firepower. But while the Ballard won over hunters and competitive shooters, the next rifle carried soldiers through war and into the frontier. A repeater that gave ordinary men the kind of firepower few had ever imagined. Number 7. The Spencer Repeating Rifle, the rifle that changed the battlefield. When the Spencer repeating rifle first appeared in the 1860s, it made nearly every other long gun on the frontier feel instantly outdated. Chambered in .56 to .56 rimfire and fed by a 7-round tubular magazine built into the buttstock, the Spencer could unleash shot after shot with a simple flick of the lever. At a time when most men were still fumbling with powder and ball, the Spencer gave its users 7 chances before stopping to reload. A life or death difference in a firefight. Union cavalrymen during the Civil War quickly made the Spencer infamous. Soldiers armed with it could maintain a steady rate of fire of 20 rounds per minute, while their opponents struggled to get off 3 or 4. Abraham Lincoln himself test-fired one on the White House lawn and immediately recognized its potential. After the war, thousands of surplus rifles followed veterans west, arming settlers, lawmen, and even outlaws who wanted a repeater with real reach. In terms of specs, the Spencer wasn't the most powerful rifle of its time. The .56 to .56 cartridge fired a 350-grain bullet at around 1,200 feet per second, giving it an effective range of 300 to 500 yards. Still plenty deadly compared to the muskets it replaced. At that distance, a Spencer shot could drop a man or a horse, and the psychological effect of facing a repeater in trained hands was devastating. The Spencer's drawbacks were real. Rimfire ammunition was expensive and sometimes unreliable, and against the massive .45-70 rounds of later rifles, it lacked raw stopping power. Reloading the tubular magazine also took time, forcing shooters to carry preloaded Blakesley cartridge boxes to stay in the fight. Even so, the Spencer changed the frontier forever. For the first time, repeating fire and long-range accuracy were combined in a single practical weapon, one that gave ordinary men the ability to face overwhelming odds and walk away alive. But if the Spencer gave the frontier its first true repeater, the rifle waiting at number 6 would push long-range firepower into a whole new era, blending innovation with raw power in a design that pointed straight toward the future. Number 6, the Peabody Rifle, the forgotten innovator. Not every rifle that shaped the frontier became a household name. The Peabody Rifle, first patented in 1862 by Henry O. Peabody, rarely gets the spotlight, but its design was years ahead of its time and helped pave the way for some of the West's most famous long-range rifles. The Peabody was a single-shot, breech-loading rifle chambered in hard-hitting cartridges like .50-70 and .45-70. Instead of muzzle loading, a soldier or hunter simply dropped a metallic cartridge into the tilting breech block, closed it, and fired. That system gave it excellent reliability and a fast rate of aimed fire compared to the muskets still common during its introduction. At long ranges, the Peabody performed exceptionally well. Accurate out to 800 yards with enough power to take down buffalo, horses, or enemy riflemen with brutal efficiency. In terms of specs, a Peabody chambered in 50-70 could push a 450-grain bullet at around 1,250 feet per second, delivering more than 1,500 foot-pounds of energy. That kind of hitting power made it one of the more formidable rifles on the frontier, capable of handling both large game and battlefield threats. Though the U.S. military only adopted the Peabody in limited numbers, it saw widespread use internationally, arming armies in Canada, Switzerland, and several European nations. On the American frontier, surplus rifles filtered into the hands of settlers and hunters who valued its ruggedness and long-range accuracy. While not as famous as the Springfield Trapdoor or the Sharps, it earned quiet respect as a dependable rifle that got the job done. The Peabody's real legacy, however, was its influence. Its breech-loading system directly inspired later rifles like the Martini Henry in Britain, one of the most iconic military rifles of the 19th century. Without the Peabody, the leap from musket to modern rifle would have taken far longer. The Peabody may have set the stage, but the next rifle would break new ground entirely, bringing bolt-action technology into the Wild West and hinting at the weapons of the 20th century. Number 5. The Remington Lee bolt-action. The future arrives early. The frontier didn't just inherit 19th century guns. It received the first hints of 20th century rifle design. That shift is embodied by early bolt-action rifles like the Remington Lee family, one of the first practical bolt-action systems with a detachable magazine to reach American users. Where single shots and falling block rifles demanded careful reloads, the Lee action introduced a fast, positive bolt lift and the ability to feed multiple cartridges quickly and reliably, a genuine game-changer for long-range shooting and skirmishing alike. Technically, the Lee Remington actions were built to accept heavy military-grade cartridges, think the era's 45-70 and similar big bores, delivering long-range accuracy with a repeatable, robust mechanism. The bolt locked strongly, the firing cycle was smooth, and when paired with appropriate sights or scopes, a trained shooter could place carefully aimed rounds out past typical engagement distances, 600, 800 yards and beyond, depending on the load and conditions. The detachable box magazine, unusual at the time, meant a marksman could carry preloaded chargers and quickly return to aimed fire without fumbling with loose cartridges. On the frontier, this mattered. Hunters who needed precise, repeatable shots for big game appreciated the bolt's rigidity and consistent trigger breaks. Militia and scouts liked the faster follow-up shots without sacrificing long-range accuracy. The new action also made it easier to mount long-range aperture sights or early telescopes, turning competent shooters into reliable long-range marksmen rather than one-shot wonders. But early bolt actions were not perfect rifles for every scenario. They tended to be more mechanically complex than the old single-shot warhorses, which could make them more sensitive to poor maintenance in dusty, wet conditions. Detachable magazines introduced logistical problems too. More moving parts to keep track of and ammunition compatibility to worry about on the trail. And while bolt actions offered repeatable accuracy, their practical advantage only showed when the shooter had time and cover to deliver precise aimed fire rather than a close, chaotic gunfight. Still, the Remington Lee family and its kin pointed the way forward. They were the first designs on the frontier that clearly belonged to the next century. Bolt action repeatability, smoother ergonomics, and the concept of quickly chambering multiple aimed rounds. In short, they made the long-range rifle not just powerful, but reliably so. If the bolt action hinted at the future, the rifle at number 4 perfected the reach. A heavy caliber repeater built to dominate both plains and mountains. Number 4, the Winchester Model 1886. The heavy caliber repeater that ruled the range. When frontier hunters and guides demanded a lever action that could chew through the heaviest cartridges of the day, John Browning's answer arrived in the Winchester Model 1886. Built on a far stronger frame than earlier Winchesters, the 1886 was designed to handle the large-bore rounds that single-shot buffalo rifles used. Think 45-70 and the monster loads that could drop a bull buffalo cleanly. For the first time, you could have repeat fire convenience and serious long-range stopping power in the same rifle. Mechanically, the 1886 used a robust locking system and a beefy receiver that tolerated higher pressures. Barrel lengths commonly ran 26 to 32 inches, giving the rifle stability for long, accurate shots. When loaded with heavy bullets, 400 to 600 grains depending on caliber, the 1886 produced muzzle energies in the neighborhood of high thousands of foot-pounds, on par with contemporary big-bore single shots, which translated into real downrange authority. That meant hunters could place aimed shots on elk, bear, or bison at distances where lighter lever guns simply couldn't be trusted. The real-world impact was immediate. Guides, professional hunters, and wealthy plainsmen prized the 1886 because it let them stalk big game with faster follow-up shots. On long hunts across the plains or in broken mountain country, a mounted hunter could make an aimed shot, cycle the lever, and be ready again before the quarry had a chance to react. That repeatability changed the calculus of long-range hunting. It made precision sustainable under pressure, but the 1886 wasn't perfect for every role. Heavy as a tool, it was more cumbersome on long pack trips than a lightweight single shot. The potent cartridges produced punishing recoil, and ammunition was expensive for ordinary settlers. Compared to the light, fast-handling Winchesters favored by ranchers for everyday work, the Model 1886 was a specialist rifle, brutally effective when used for its purpose, awkward elsewhere. Its legacy is simple and large. The Winchester 1886 proved lever actions could be more than fast repeaters. They could be true long-range hunting rifles, able to stand toe-to-toe with single-shot buffalo guns while offering follow-up fire. That combination of reach and repeatability made it a turning point in frontier guncraft. If the 1886 married power and repeat fire, the next rifle took a different route entirely. A precision single shot, so feared on the plains it rewrote what hunters thought possible at extreme range. Number 3, the Winchester Model 1876, the big bore lever that bridged two worlds. When hunters and guides demanded the repeatability of a Winchester with the stopping power of a buffalo rifle, the Model 1876 answered the call. John Browning's strengthened action and Winchester's heavier receivers made the 1876 capable of handling large centerfire cartridges that earlier lever guns could not. Chambered in rounds such as the 45-75 Winchester and the 50-95 Express, the Model 1876 put heavy, long-range hitting power into a fast-cycling, practical package. On paper, the numbers tell the story. A 45-75 load would push a 400 to 450 grain bullet in the neighborhood of 1,300 to 1,400 feet per second. Muzzle energies easily rivaling many single-shot buffalo rifles at moderate ranges. With barrel lengths typically 26 to 32 inches, the 1876 provided ballistic performance that allowed accurate, hard-hitting shots out to several hundred yards. And in expert hands, it could still be effective considerably further. For guides stalking elk in broken country or hunters lining up a shot on a wary bull, the combination of follow-up capability and raw power was irresistible. The real-world impact was immediate. Guides on the plains and in the Rockies carried the 1876 because it offered a practical compromise. You weren't forced to choose between power and rate of fire. A mounted hunter could drop a heavy animal with a well-placed shot, then cycle the lever and place another if needed. That repeatability reduced the tactical risk of missing a single costly shot. A big plus while stalking dangerous game or running long excursions away from supply. But it wasn't flawless. To handle the larger pressures, Winchester beefed up the action, which made the rifle heavier and bulkier than standard lever guns. Recoil from big-bore cartridges was punishing, and the cost of ammunition put it out of reach for many settlers. Compared to single-shot specialists like the Sharp's Big 50, the 1876 still conceded a slight edge in ultimate long-range accuracy. It traded that last fractional bit of long-range precision for practicality and follow-up speed. In the frontier calculus, that was often the right trade. The Model 1876 didn't just extend a man's range, it made long-range power sustainable under pressure, which is why professional hunters and guides gave it so much respect. If the Winchester 1876 brought big-bore repeatability to the plains, the next rifle is the one every marksman whispered about. A single shot so feared for pure range and power that it earned near mythical status. Number 2, the Sharp's Borchardt Model 1878, the Precision Powerhouse. By the late 1870s, single-shot rifles had already earned their place on the frontier. But when Sharps introduced the Borchardt Model 1878, it raised the bar to a level that made other rifles feel instantly obsolete. This wasn't just another buffalo gun. It was one of the most advanced single-shot rifles of the 19th century, and it set accuracy records that still stand in shooting lore. Designed by Hugo Borchert, who would later go on to create the famous Borchert C93 pistol, the 1878 Sharps replaced the familiar falling block system with a sleek, hammerless action. The striker-fired design made the lock time incredibly fast, eliminating the slight delay between pulling the trigger and firing. For long-range marksmen, that tiny difference meant greater consistency and tighter shot groups at extreme ranges. Specs-wise, the Sharps Borchardt came in heavy calibers like 45-70, 45-90, and 45-120. A 45-90 load could fire a 500 grain bullet at around 1,300 feet per second, carrying over 1,800 foot-pounds of energy downrange. With a heavy 30-inch barrel and precision sights, shooters could reliably engage targets beyond 1,000 yards. Distances that transformed hunters and competitors alike into long-range legends. On the frontier, professional marksmen and buffalo hunters embraced it. At shooting competitions, Borcherts dominated the long-range matches, with some shooters hitting steel plates at a full mile. For hunters, it meant confidence. The ability to drop the largest game with surgical precision before it ever sensed danger. But like many rifles ahead of their time, it had drawbacks. The complex action was expensive to manufacture, making the Borchardt less common than simpler Sharps models. Its heavy weight made it cumbersome for travel, and its recoil with the big cartridges was not for the faint of heart. Yet those who mastered it swore by its performance. The Borchardt wasn't just a rifle, it was the pinnacle of frontier single-shot design. It proved that in the right hands, precision and engineering could make one man nearly untouchable at extreme range. And if the Borchardt was the peak of single-shot precision, the rifle at number 1 became the legend that outlasted them all. A design so enduring it carried the frontier into the modern age. Number 1. The Winchester model, 1894, the legend that never died. When it comes to long-range rifles of the Wild West, none had the enduring impact of the Winchester model 1894. Introduced at the very tail end of the frontier era, this rifle bridged the gap between the black powder 19th century and the smokeless powder modern age. It wasn't just another Winchester, it became the Winchester, and one of the most successful rifles ever made. The 94's claim to fame was its chambering in the brand new .30-30 Winchester cartridge, the first small-bore, smokeless powder sporting round in America. Firing a 150 to 170 grain bullet at around 2,000 feet per second, the 30-30 carried flat, hard, and accurate well past 300 yards. Compared to the heavy, arcing black powder rounds of earlier rifles, the .30-30 was a revolution. A true long-range cartridge for hunting and defense. Specs-wise, the rifle's slim 20 to 26-inch barrels and slick lever action cycling made it both fast and accurate. It combined the handling of earlier Winchesters with the ballistic performance of a new era. Hunters quickly discovered it could reliably take deer, bear, and even elk at ranges that older lever guns struggled to reach. On the frontier's last days, it gave settlers, ranchers, and lawmen a tool that was light enough to carry all day but powerful enough to handle nearly any threat. The Model 1894's popularity was staggering. More than 7 million rifles were eventually produced, and it went on to become one of the most beloved hunting rifles in American history. Even today, more than a century later, countless hunters still take to the woods each season with a Winchester 94 in hand. No other rifle from the frontier era had that kind of staying power. It wasn't perfect. Early versions lacked the massive punch of buffalo rifles like the Sharps, and it wasn't quite as indestructible as the rolling block. But its balance of speed, accuracy, and modern ammunition made it the rifle that carried the West into the 20th century. The Winchester 1894 wasn't just another frontier gun. It was the embodiment of survival, resilience, and progress. The rifle that became a true American icon. From the precision of the Whitworth to the brute force of the Big 50, and finally the timeless reach of the Winchester 1894, these long-range rifles didn't just arm the frontier, they defined it. Which one shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more Wild West history brought back to life.